In this video, we're going to show you how to replace an engine coolant temperature sensor on your Toyota Tacoma. This will be located under the intake manifold. Let's get started. Using a 10mm socket, remove the 3 screws for the air intake. There's one more on the other side. Loosen the clamp for the throttle body using a 10mm socket. Loosen the clamp for the air boot. Remove the vacuum hose. Pinch the clamp and remove the vacuum hose off the back side of the intake. Remove the connector. Push on the tab. Pull straight back. Pull the vacuum hose out of the bracket. Remove the plastic stay using a trim tool. There's one more in the front. Pop that out. Pull the intake off to the side. Remove the connector for the throttle body. Push on the tab, pull straight back, remove the connector. Remove the connector for the purge. There's a tab on my pointer finger. We'll pull straight up. Using a 10mm socket, we're going to remove the 2 bolts and 2 nuts for the throttle body. We're pulling the throttle body off of the intake manifold so that we don't have to deal with the coolant that'll come out of these hoses. We're going to flop the throttle body to the back. Using a 10mm socket, remove the bolt for the fuel lines. There's a tab on the back here. We're going to push on this tab, pull straight up. Remove it off of that bracket. Pinch the clamp for the evap line, pull it up. Remove the line from the valve, put it off to the side. Using a 10mm socket, remove the bolt for the bracket on the side of the intake manifold. Using a 12mm socket, remove the bolt for the heater hose bracket. My plastic bracket just popped off, so I'm going to fully remove it. If yours stays connected, just push it to the back. Push the hose out of the bracket in the back of the intake manifold. This will be for a coolant line. We're going to remove the booster hose from the intake manifold. There should be a clamp right here. Ours is totally rotted away. So we're going to pull our hose up. If you have a clamp, go ahead and pinch that clamp, pull it up, and then pull the hose off of the intake. There's going to be 2 12mm bolts inside these ports in the intake manifold. Using a 12mm socket on a long extension, we're going to loosen these two bolts and remove them. The second one will be located in this cubby back here. Remove the bolts. We're going to remove the two nuts and one bolt for the top of the intake manifold. The two nuts are going to be on either end. We're going to go after the second nut in the back. Remove the bolt in the middle of the intake. Using a 12mm socket, we're going to remove the two bolts on the bottom of the intake manifold. Our second 12mm bolt is going to be located right above the starter. Remove the bolt, pull the intake straight back, turn it up on its side, and remove it from the vehicle. Make sure it doesn't get caught on any hoses. Remove the connector for the engine coolant temperature sensor. There's a push button on the top. We'll push on this, pull straight back, remove the connector. Using a 19mm wrench, we're going to get over the sensor. Remove it from the block. Get the wrench around the sensor, get it loose, remove it from the cylinder head, install the sensor into the head, get it tight by hand, snug it down, torque the sensor to 15 foot-pounds. If you can't get a torque wrench on it, do the best you can. Install the connector, push until you hear a click. If you don't hear a click, give it a pull. Using a razor blade or a light abrasive, we're going to clean the mating surface for the intake manifold. When you scrape or clean this, you want to scrape away from the port. We don't want anything getting in there. You can fill this area with a rag to prevent anything from going in. Go down the whole mating surface, cleaning the area. Connect the connector for the knock sensor. Push until you hear a click. If you don't hear a click, give it a pull. Make sure it's locked on. Using a clean rag and some brake parts cleaner, we'll spray our rag. Then we're going to wipe down the mating surface for the intake manifold. Wiping away any dust or dirt that's left over. We're going to install our intake manifold. When we install this, this is going to be our first hose that we're going to connect. We're We're going to pinch this clamp and attach it onto the back port that is on the intake manifold. Before installing the intake manifold, take a look at your gasket. Anytime these come off, we recommend replacing them. Ours look good, so we're going to put them back on. When you take a look at them, make sure there's no cuts, tears, rips, or excessively squished down so they can't seal. Before fully installing the intake, we're going to get that hose attached onto the back. Get it onto the fitting. Pinch the clamp, pull it over the hose. Be sure it's fully seated. Install the intake manifold onto the studs. Double check that hose, be sure it's still seated. Install the top bolt and 2 nuts for the intake. Get these started by hand. Get the nuts installed on either side. I'm using a magnet to help me get these started. Get the 2 bolts started for the middle of the intake. Get the 2 bottom bolts for the intake manifold started. Torque the intake manifold bolts to 18 foot-pounds. We're going to start in the middle and work our way out. Install the bolt for the bracket on the front of the intake manifold. Snug the bolt down. Install the harness onto the bracket. Slide it down into place, give it a pull, make sure it's locked in. Grab the purge valve evap hose, install it onto the purge valve, pinch the clamp, pull it down into its original position. Install the connector for the purge valve, push until you hear a click. If you don't, give it a pull, make sure it's locked on. Grab the vacuum hose for the booster, pull it down to the front of the intake, install it onto the fitting. There should be a pinch clamp on this that you pulled up. Go ahead and squeeze that, put it back down, return it to its original position. We'll be putting a regular clamp on this. The bracket for our fuel lines fell off. We'll reinstall our fuel lines into the bracket. Install the bolt, snug it down. Install the bracket for the heater hoses. Install the bolt. This will be a 12mm head bolt. Snug the bolt down. Install the throttle body. Install the bolts. Get the nuts started. Snug down the bolts and nuts. Torque it in a cross pattern to 80 inch-pounds. Install the connector for the throttle body. Push until you hear a click. If you don't, give it a pull. Make sure it's locked on. Install the intake collector. Get it installed onto the intake tube and the throttle body first. Snug down the clamps. Install the vacuum hose on the front. Install the front bolt. Install the plastic stay on the side. Install the bolt for the side. There'll be one more in the back. Install the connector. Push until you hear a click. If you don't, give it a pull. Make sure it's locked on. Install the vacuum hose into the bracket. Install the plastic stay onto the intake collector. Install the PCV hose. Pinch the clamp. Return it to its original position. Go around and snug down all of the bolts. Torque the air collector bolts to 60 inch-pounds or 5 foot-pounds. And you're good to go.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.